am back. There was so much drama happening, but bring your head here. This
we had 1 minute.
This bald-headed one just cut me off. She just cut me off. I'm sorry. She didn't let me tell you anything. I'm sorry. We're back. And our next conversation, our last 2 conversations were with the 2 really lovely entrepreneurs, some of the best in Nigeria. Mrs. Ndidi Uwonele Okonkwo, who is their Greek specialist. And also after that, we had the conversation with Lisa, also Mrs. Lisa Folawiyo. I usually don't bother with the prefixes, you know, but I have to this time around because I have to do the prefix for my next guest, you know, Chief Dele Momodu. I want to read his full name, Chief Dr. Dele Momodu. I mean, Chief Dele Momodu is Chief Dr. Ayobamidele Abayomi Ojutelegan Ajani Momodu. I cannot wait to see Bob D. I love Bob D so much. I don't hide it. You know, Bob D of the universe, that's what I call him, because he's one of the most generous. He's generous with his platform, he's generous with his time, he's generous with his words, you know, to all of us in the industry. I mean, I'm like a younger, you know, I came after him, and when I came onto the industry, he welcomed me with open arms, and he hasn't stopped supporting me since then. And when I noticed that people Bob D talks to everyone, but he hardly ever grants interviews. So for me, it was like, Bob D, I have to talk to you. And you know what he said to me? He said, for me, I hate short interviews. I hate short interviews. And I said to him, Bob D, anything you want, and however long you want it. So I tell you, I warn all of you ahead of time. This will go on as long as we want it. So just stay with us for as long as you want to stay with us. I mean, so Mr. Dele Momodu, rather Chief Dele Momodu, but throughout the interview, I'll be calling him Bob D because the entire country knows him first and foremost as Bob D. I dare say not just the country, but also most parts of Africa. Because before Instagram, he created the idea of a platform, a picture-led platform for carrying news and sharing life, you know, for celebrities and for everyday people. I'm waiting. When I get him online, you will see him. Bob D, where are you? He does this every day. He talks to everyone. I don't know how he does the lives every day. So Chief Dele Momodu is the CEO and publisher of Bob D of the world.
Fumi Mama. How are you?
Bob D.
Fumi Mama.
Bob of the universe.
Good to be on your program.
I'll start to behave like a girl now because you're the one that brings it out in me.
No. You are a good lady, you know. And you know we love you absolutely. Unconditionally. It's unconditional.
Thank you.
So how are you tonight?
I am really good, thank you.
Yes, I watched your other guests and they did fantastically well. That was very good.
Okay, Bob D, tonight I'm the one interviewing you. I'm not going to let you do this because I know that
you're not going to let me. You're not going to let me take over.
Let me ask the first question I want to ask is, Bob D, this name Ojutelegan, your parents really gave you that name, Ojutelegan?
No, my grandmom.
Your grandmom.
My grandmom. You see, what happened was that my mom was a bit old by the time she met my father. They both had 2 children from previous marriages. So a lot of people were taunting my mom that, why are you marrying again when you cannot bear a child? And so eventually I came, and my grandmom was overexcited. And so that was her own name for me, Ojutelegan, that God has shamed, you know, the enemies who thought my daughter would not be able to bear a child for her new husband.
I mean, I love the name. It's one of my favorite names.
I love it too. It's just that it's too long.
It's too long.
It's too long. So I can't feel it in the form.
So, but talking about things being long, your longevity in the media industry is legendary. I don't think anybody has traveled the time and the spheres that you have traveled in the media industry. I mean, why haven't you given up at some point?
No, you see, don't forget that I come from an academic background.
Yeah.
I'd wanted to be a teacher, probably marry a teacher and live happily thereafter. But God changed my trajectory. So the truth of it is that for as long as I live, I'll be a journalist. I discovered my passion and I'm holding on tight to it. And I'm not going to let any young man or any young girl kick me out of the way. I've told my son, Eniafe, who is interested in media, I said, go and work elsewhere. Don't disturb us here. Go and work elsewhere. Then maybe later you can join us. So he's working for a magazine in London. He's not even in the family business at all. Let him go and learn how to make money. Let him go and learn how to struggle. But for me, you will see that even in social media, I'm not agreeing. I will not agree. Nobody is going to kick me out of this thing. I don't even think I've done 50% of what I know I have the capacity of doing yet.
Right.
I haven't. So watch out.
You're an early adopter of technologies, of whatever is changing in the media, you're there. Because I remember once, even with social media, in the hotel room, I think it was in New York or somewhere, and you had kind of like an office setup, like a studio, and there you were doing kind of like, and I'm like, I mean, what's up with this man? When is he ever going to switch off? You don't switch off.
That was at the Waldorf Astoria,
yes,
in New York, at the Waldorf.
Yes,
I remember.
I have that mental picture in my head of you there doing all of those things. But then some will argue that you've had amazing opportunities to go into other things that would have given you tremendous amounts of money and power. You already had a lot, but that's not to be compared with political power, for example, in a place like Nigeria. I mean, you contested an election, to be fair. That was one time that you seem to have segued a bit from the media. To start with, why did you contest that election at that time?
Well, let me put it this way, that I am happy that I didn't go full hog into politics. I describe myself as a part-time politician. Because if I had gone fully into it, then maybe what I built, the brand I managed to build, would have perished in the process. I contested more out of frustration. I was tired of lamenting like Jeremiah. We all lament in Nigeria, government is bad, the leaders are bad, the followers are bad. So why don't you then bring yourself into it and see if you can make the difference? Unfortunately, maybe I was too naive or too simplistic, and I thought Nigeria was ready. I would say I was influenced again by the emergence of Barack Obama in America. So I saw myself in the mold of a Barack Obama. But, when you live in antiquity, it is more difficult. What is happening is that we have a lot of young people. We have the population that could drive the change that we truly desire, but that population is slowed down by two deadly diseases, ignorance and poverty. When you combine those two diseases, they are almost terminal. And that is why the problems of Nigeria are intractable. You will see that every time we think we're closer to our destination, something is going to pull us back. That has been the story of Nigeria. So for me, I'm happy. As soon as I lost the election, I left Abuja. I had a house in Abuja at the time because Abuja is the center of Nigeria. Immediately, I left Abuja, gave up the property, and I never went back for another 2 years. I realized that I needed to quickly settle back to my business before I would join the growing list of serial contestants. They contest at every election, they lose at every election, and the next time you are going to see them again is a year to election. No, that's not how to do it. I realize that the day my country needs me, my country will find me. That is very essential. And I advise all young people, when Fela Dutoye came to see me, I told him, I said, never beg to serve your nation. If truly you want to serve, present yourself, put forward your credentials, and let Nigerians accept or reject you. So that's what happened in my own case. But I gained something. And if you ask me what did I gained Twitter, I gained Instagram, I gained Facebook, and now I've translated those into my business. And I'm very grateful to God for that opportunity.
Right. Media, I mean, I remember the first time I heard your voice, your name. I think I heard your name in connection to May Ellen Ezekiel. I was possibly a teenager. I just came out of university at that time, and you were this larger than life. You know, you still are, you know, Preston, whom everybody was talking about then. Then, of course, there was Concord, you know, and the whole of the Abiola. So you've traversed the media, and from print to electronic to social media, one form or the other. The media has changed not just in Nigeria, but globally. Technology has changed media. It doesn't, and there's a lot of struggling to be able to make media viable. That's on one hand as a business. Then, of course, because you also understand politics, you know the role of media as a pillar of democracy. These two, can they ever really converge? The role of the media as a pillar of democracy and the role of media as a business that's supposed to make profit.
You see, it's a very technical question, very, very technical. Yes, they can meet. What we've succeeded in doing at Ovation was to know that there is no sentiment and there is no emotion about business. And that we needed to treat Ovation as a business. Most of those who went into media in the past, that's why they almost nearly collapsed. Well, most of them collapsed once the media owners collapsed. If you look at Concord newspapers, Concord would probably be alive today if it was strictly a business and it was not synonymous with the owner as a politician. If you look at the Tribune is probably the only one that has survived from that generation. Chief Obafemi Awolowo owned the Tribune, but the Awolowos were very good at running it as a business. Till today, even after Mama left, that's Chief Mrs. H.I.D. Awolowo, she transferred to her children. So the first chairman, you understand, came, Mrs. Oyediro. Now I think we have Dr. Tokunbo Awolowo Dosunmu in charge. So they've been able to survive from generation to generation. But if you look at another example in Nigeria, the Champion newspapers owned by Chief Emmanuel Nwanyahu. Chief Nwanyahu is still alive, but the Champion has had to struggle because Chief Nwanyahu, I think, went so much into politics. And of course, the media is a casino. If you are not a big-time gambler and you are able to generate resources from different investments, you are not likely to survive. A lot of people came, they wanted to do Ovation. The reason they didn't survive was not because they were not brilliant enough, was not because of a dearth of good stories or good events, but because they didn't realize that there were secrets to it. There's always a method to madness in a place like Nigeria. You must understand your terrain very well. So they thought Ovation was just making like that easily. No. But what we did was to diversify, unknown to people, maybe secretly, into different things. For example, one of my biggest income earner is public relations, PR. From day one, we decided that Ovation would never attack people. We wanted a magazine, a lifestyle magazine that will mirror the lifestyle of the rich and famous. There were not many celebrities when we started. We had to create our own. We looked at, Hello magazine, looked at OK, look at Tatler and the rest of them in Europe. And we realized that, hey, in those places, they pay celebrities to feature in their magazines. We had to do the opposite. Because we didn't have a preponderance of celebrities in Africa. We only had footballers, a few movie stars. If you like, combine Genevieve with Omotola, with everybody and put them on your cover, you will never break even in Nigeria. You understand? Whereas if you were to put a David Beckham on the cover of a magazine in London, you can sell 2 million copies.
Yeah, if you were to put because we can't sell, is that not because of the distribution challenge? Because
no, that's not it.
People are forgotten.
No, we don't have reading culture. That's the first thing. We don't have a reading culture. You will see that if you go on the tube or on any surface train in England, you will find everybody holding one thing or the other, either a book or a magazine or a newspaper to read. We don't have that culture. Yes, I agree with you that the distribution network here is also very clumsy, but that's not it. If you have the reading culture, people will find it and they will buy. So for us at Ovation, we now had to do something. One, get people addicted. When we started, we used to beg people to let us into their events. In fact, some places, they would not even let us in. We don't. In the north, they used to tell us that you cannot photograph a woman in their homes. So what did we do? We found a female photographer. So the female photographer, of course, is able to penetrate those homes, and then people started seeing the beauty. And we were able to get people hooked on it. You have to get your product to a level where people are addicted. When people are addicted to any product, they are ready to pay a premium on it.
Right.
That is what has sustained us today. If you do a big event and Ovation did not cover it, then you've wasted your money. Because the essence is what lifestyle magazines sell is what they call vanity. The reason why do you think Instagram is popular today is because of photography. That is why I want to thank you for that description that Ovation was Instagram before Instagram. You're absolutely right. People are never tired of photograph. People can be tired of reading. If somebody tells you now that Funmi Nyoda, oh, I saw you on the cover of Tribune. Maybe you have not read Tribune in a long time. You will find that copy of Tribune by fire by force. So that is what, and because Ovation became big, we started building and bringing out our icons. Look at a magazine that featured a Chief Fernandez, a Chief Adenuga, you understand, a Chief Abiola. So it became aspirational. There was a woman who called me once. I didn't know her from anywhere. She said, please, my daughter is getting married. And I promised 10 years ago that whenever my daughter is getting married, there are two things I must do. One of them is that our wedding must be featured in Ovation, and Alhaji Agba, Sikiru Ayinde Barrister, must perform. Even if he will be on a wheelchair, he must come and perform. So it has become something that people save towards it. People want to be in the magazine because, once you appear in it, you have made it.
Now, Bobby, I want to bring this. I'm going to come back to Ovation itself and the structure and all of that and the media itself. But I want to take it to COVID in particular. You were one of the first. I don't know if you were the first, but I think you were one of the first. Not only are you one of the first, you are the most prolific liver. You are the most prolific in use of lives. You are there almost every day. You have long live sessions. I mean, when COVID hits, nobody knew what to do. You seem to almost immediately know what to do. Abi,
no, is it that I said, if you come from an academic background, it enables you to do research. People sometimes, when I tell my friends some things that will happen, and it sounds so prophetic, they're always wondering, boy, Sean Diffani, are you consulting the oracle or not? It's just the power of the brain. Your imagination can take you far. What happened was that I was not the first to do Instagram Live during COVID. Instagram Live had been
In
there.
Nigeria. In
Nigeria, I was not the first. Instagram Live had been there, but people were using it mainly for entertainment. So that's why you didn't notice people were using it. It was only for artists. Okay, let's talk to an artist, Majek Fashek. Let's bring King Sonny. And that was how it started. So what happened to me, you won't believe it, that a few young people galvanized me into it, but they did not even know. I think it was Sheung, the commissioner for youth in Ibadan, who's the one they called me, said, oh, he wanted to interview me and all that. And I said, oh, why not interview me? Then I did an interview. Then a lady also from Scotland, Diana Childs, also called me, said she wants to interview me. Then I sat back. I said, come on, all these interviews, but I know more people than these guys. I know presidents, I know vice presidents, I know everybody. And then that was it. I just called Dr. Kayode Fayemi. I said, please, I'm starting something and I want you to be the first. Why did I call him? He's the chairman, Governors Forum. If he agrees, so who else will say no to me? You understand? So I called him and I said, Bob Dia, anything for you now. How can I say no? And that was how I started with him. I called Peter Obi. Peter Obi agreed. I called the vice president of Liberia. She agreed. I said, you are the new single. That was it. And you will not believe it. Once I call people, because the key word in journalism is integrity. Yeah. Once people can trust you with their lives, you will succeed as a journalist. But if people have doubts about you, if they think you are out to destroy their lives, if they think you are out to let out their secrets, nobody will touch you.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I subscribe to that.
When I called you, you said, Bob D, I won't do this interview normally, but how do I look at you and say no? And you agreed. Yeah. So you were part of that success story of me migrating from hardcore now to social media. Now, this is like running a television station in your own home.
Yeah.
From here, I interviewed one of my greatest idols, Professor Wande Abimbola, all the way in America.
Mm-hmm.
We spoke for 3.5 hours. That is probably my longest interview. After the one we did for the former president of Ghana, Jerry John Rawlings.
Mm-hmm.
We did a 5-day interview with him spanning 18 hours. You will not believe it.
Yeah.
But for one stretch interview, 3.5 hours, I was speaking to Professor Wande Abimbola. So that's how it started. And for me, my ideas just come. I can be very spontaneous. I think at the speed of light. Some people, they will be dragging, they can't make up their me. Once I see a window of opportunity, trust me, even if it is half open, I will go in.
So, I mean, in your career, a lot of younger people may not know this because they were not there and we don't keep great records. But you are at times when it mattered, you have spoken to people who people thought were inaccessible, and you have had audiences with some of the most powerful people in the world, including the Queen of England. I remember President Bill Clinton at the time. Everyone. There was a time you were one of the first to move to Ghana to set up a home in Ghana, became quite close to the presidents of Ghana. You spoke now about Jerry Rawlings, who, is kind of like the godfather of modern Ghana. So that's a lot of access. Why do you think you've already alluded to that people trust you, but how did you gain trust to start with? Because it must have started from somewhere.
Well, as I said, sorry, I put off my AC so that I could hear you well, so I have to. Yes, you see, what happened to me is that I always say it. In whatever you want to do, there is a process. The process of gaining access to people is via preparation. You must prepare. When you prepare, then you will be ready to take on the world. I was very fortunate as a young man. I started life early. I graduated at the age of 22. By the age of 23, I was already a private secretary to the then deputy governor of Ondo State when Ondo was a combination of Ondo and Ekiti states. Thereafter, I worked for Oba Okunadeshijwade Lubushe II, the Oni of Ife. After that, I went back for my master's. Then I started my first job in Lagos in 1988 was with Concord Newspapers owned by Chief Abela. So if you look at the cumulative experience that I gathered from age 23 to age 28, you'll be looking at about 5 years of meeting different people. By the time I was 22, I already knew most of the big men in NPN, the National Party of Nigeria, the ruling party under President Shagari. The Akinjides, the Akiloyes, the Oluloyos, the Bola Iges, I was already meeting and interacting. So I didn't know that journey was preparing me for journalism. You understand? So because without access, even if people trust you, first you must have built that access. So if, for example, I've been coming to your house over time, and one day I say I want to interview you, then it becomes you'll be relaxed with me because you're already familiar. So I had familiarity with a lot of these guys. That's point number one. The next thing was that the big men also, they are watching their contemporaries. So if you see an Otumba Shubomi Balogun on the cover of a magazine celebrating his 80th birthday, maybe you are around 78 at that time. So you are also hoping that by the time your own comes, because people are going to say you are a poor man. If your story is not innovation, it means that you are not ready. You go and put it in one Jekuredu magazine. People are going, so life is about competition. The rich men also compete. The rich women in particular, they love photography more than the men. And my strategy is that most times when there is a wedding, I don't talk to the groom. Sometimes the grooms don't want their girlfriends to know they are getting married. So I target the bride. I'm giving you serious strategy. When the brides call me, they say, it's expensive. Oh, I say, madam, use your money wisely. Do you know your husband might still have some ambitious girlfriends? So you have to put your stamp, your signature on him by putting the wedding in the say, oh, it's free.
Bob D, I must ask this question though. You were also one of the journalists who were fighting against the military. You did another form of journalism before all of this. You, in essence, you were sent on, you had to go on exile. So you were doing at one time what they call, a kind of investigative political journalism.
I would call it more of guerrilla. I was doing that, yes, because I was threatened. That was not my primary focus. I've always been an entertainment person. But I did that because of the June 12th crisis, and now they accused me of being one of the brains behind the radio station, Radio Freedom, later Radio Kudirat. So I had to join them. So if someone accuses you of something you know nothing about, then you may show interest. That's what happened.
Yeah, but those were not easy years, were they?
No, they were not. You see, my attitude to life is that I am an incurable fatalist. I believe that ultimately we're all blind. We're all just groping in darkness. We don't know where God is leading us. That is why we have to wake up and work. For me, it was not easy, but it turned out to be the best moment of my life. If I had not gone on that exile, there would be no Ovation the way it is today. Ovation,
because I remember you launched this from there,
Exactly. I launched it while in exile. That's why sometimes when people say, oh, why are you not fighting in Abacha? Why are you not fighting Babangida? I said, God can use a bad situation to make your life suitable. And that's what happened in my case. I've realized that whenever I reach a dead end, whenever I find myself in trouble, something new is about to happen. So I'm not, yes, go on.
So in terms of, because you spoke something very important now, you said you were co-op, because sometimes we are doing, as they say in Nigeria, you're going JJ on your own and trying to come and jam somebody. So this might be your ambition, but because of the circumstance of your environment, the political environment we live in, things can just go up in arm, and we're all forced into something that's far from what we planned. COVID seems to be something like that too now. It's JJ, everybody is going in the world, and this virus has come to jam all of us. So there's a future that I would like for you to predict for media, because it's very interesting what's happening in the media sphere now, in terms of what sort of journalism, what sort of media Nigeria needs to become the country we say we want.
Let me tell you, Fumi, there is no future to predict because the future is there already. And I'm already part of that present future. If you are thinking the future is next year or 2 years to come, no. The future is now. I've already embraced it. I have forced myself into it. As I like to say, by fire, by force, I'm already a part of that future. Because now I've reorganized the way we run business at Ovation. Before you pack 20, 25, 30 people into one office, that will not happen. Because one, we have to be compliant. So when you talk about social distancing, you must start from your own office. You must start from your home. You will not see 30 people come into my home now. There are people who say, oh, Bob D, I want to come and visit you. And I'll tell them no. Even the few that I will allow now, we have to properly sanitize them from head to toe. If what they will go through, we probably discourage them from coming. It's the same thing in the office. We've created a new office now, and that office is mainly for production purposes. And if you see the pictures of how we have set it up, you will know that we're already in the future. So that future that you want me to predict, I will tell you, only a foolish media organization now will bring 100, 200 staff into its premises. It's no longer necessary. For the job that I do, I don't see how we can fully function in the next 3 months to 6 months or thereabout. Photography. Am I going to be photographing people wearing masks like a Google? Sometimes now we go to functions, you can't even recognize the person whose picture you are taking. So it means I don't need photographers in my office. Fortunately, we've taken the pain because of the love that we have for our staff. A lot of media organizations right now cannot pay salaries. That's the truth. Even before COVID, it was difficult paying salaries. We have managed, God has helped us to pay salaries. We don't owe any staff as of today. Now, so we want to help the staff. We are not reducing your salary. Even banks are laying off staff. They are sacking people. In our own case, we are not going to lay people off. We pray that we will not reach a desperate situation where we have to lay them off. We will pay you. Before, you used to come to work every day, and you will now have to pay for transport, pay for this, pay for that. Now you can operate from your home. If you are a photographer, if we have an event, we will send you out from your house. You have your camera, you have everything. You go and take the picture. We will give you enough access to internet. Your data, you are not short of data. So you don't even need to come. You can send it to us from anywhere. You understand what I'm saying? So
a lot of it will be remote.
I can't hear you, please.
A lot of it will be remote.
Exactly. So things now must be done remotely. You don't have to see your editor. I know of magazines that publish from India.
Yeah.
The magazine that we print, we used to carry it physically to London every month. Now we don't go to our printers again.
I remember hearing the story of that. Somebody saying something here, Bobby, that I wanted you to address. I think that 00811 says the future of media isn't this. To be honest, the future will see something. We'll see dismantling of syndicated TV. Will be more sourcing and free content. Somebody also is asking, what is the future of paper print in Nigeria?
Yes, I
So
will come to
one
it.
comment, one question.
Yes, I will come to it. The thing is that, let me just see it. Okay, the future of media isn't this. To be honest, the future will see dismantling of syndicated TV. I don't know. Anyway, what I know is that I will start from the magazine. Then I will go into television because we also have Ovation TV. And we have plans of going 24 hours very soon. We're already working on that. In fact, we already have a platform ready. So we're just working out the logistics. So now, from the magazine, we no longer have to travel. My editor used to travel physically to go to London because the printers will send you proofs and you must sign every page before they will roll out. Okay, the Western printers will not allow you to come back and say they made a mistake. So if there is a mistake, it must have come from you. Now we don't have to do that. They've set up, things for us. They send us a mail. They give us a password. We go into that mail and you can edit everything online and you send it back to them and you sign. So imagine how much you have saved from flying, from accommodation and all that. The same thing will happen in television. If I want to interview you now, I did some interviews for AIT the other day. It was on Zoom. I did interview on Arise News Channel. It was on Zoom. I did interview on TVC. So it means you don't need to start carrying all kinds of cameras. And these things will also improve with time, even the quality. When I remember the digital cameras, we used to load film, Agfa, you remember Agfa, Kodak, all those films. Now, they have been completely eliminated. Now you can take 1,000 shots if you have fast cameras in 1 minute. So, so this will also go to television. So if you are not creative enough, trust me, media is dead. Media is yes.
So I think what that person was talking about is actually even the distribution end, because he's saying then that there will be no syndication. So that means you don't have all these big, all the cable channels, all of that will be unnecessary because content will be individual and distributed on individuals' whims and on different platforms. Most of them maybe like YouTube or maybe like VODs or even the streaming.
No, it is not as simple as that. You see, don't forget that content is big money. To produce, you know it better than anybody, to produce a 1 hour documentary, how long it will take and how much will be required. So the media will still be the exclusive preserve of those who have big funding. Of course, we already have a proliferation via Instagram now. Everybody is producing something. But that is not the level of the media we are talking about. We're talking about media conglomerates. You understand? If you are talking about availability of content, of course, that is already happening. Everybody now is on Instagram Live. You can wake up in the middle of the night, you don't feel like sleeping. You run your own, you understand? But we're talking about media that can make money, media that you can have a Glow buy into, a Tony Elumelu buy into, and all these big players. That is what we're so it becomes more competitive. People are not going to just give adverts to anybody now, and because you are my friend, that will not happen. You must be able to justify why someone must place an advert or use you for their PR events.
Why did you choose the name Ovation?
Again, I didn't choose it deliberately, but it just happened that when I left my job at Classic, I wanted to do a magazine. And at that time, I was living in the same apartment with Kunle Bakare, who was part of Fame magazine. So I told him I want to start a magazine and I'm looking for a name. So he then brought out a thesaurus. And then as we were going, we were seeing all kinds of titles. Glitterati, Encomium. And then I saw Ovation. I said, Ovation, loud. Ovation means loud. Loud for a purpose. So that was how it just struck me that that would be a good name for a magazine. And I wanted to do it. This was around 1991, 92, but I couldn't get the funding. Then I forgot about it, went into PR, was making good money in PR. I never dreamt I would ever do a magazine until Abacha chased me out of Nigeria. That's why I said, in my own case, as bad as it was for me going into exile, I must thank my God that it happened, because without that, there would have been no Ovation International.
Which is your favorite interview ever that you conducted? Do you remember? And which is the interview you wish you had conducted?
Our best interview ever. Wow. I think it won't be, the question won't be our best interview. Maybe if you say our best cover.
Okay.
You see, because most of our stories don't rely on interviews. It's the cover. It's a largely pictorial magazine. So we deal more with photography. If you are talking, if I was sold Ovation was not the interview, people used to complain that they don't even have anything to read, but it's the quality of the pictures. We have done some amazing job. I would say our most ambitious photography ever was the home of Chief Hernandez in New York. That island. I will never in my entire life see anything like that again. I doubt it. I don't think there's any Nigerian or any African who lives like that again. That was, if you are looking for original flamboyance, that was the peak of it. And then I had to fly in a Scottish photographer of blessed memory now, Colin Ramsey. We used to call him the godfather of photography. The man must have been 70-something years old. And we flew to New York together. And Chief just gave us an open house, open check to do whatever needed to be done. He gave us boats for us to go on the waters, for us to be able, we were shooting from the, I mean, I've never seen anything like it. We were shooting, the man had a garage with hydraulic, he had some hydraulic pumps. If the seawater flooded his compound, automatically those hydraulic will raise up all the vehicles so that salt water will not come into them. And then they're also pumping out the seawater back to the sea. He had his own private, lounges. It had its own, what do you call, the private beaches. Oh my God.
Oh my God, I don't.
You don't want to imagine every door knob. And it was a very traditional man. Every door knob in the house was customized. And they wrote Ajinijini Ogun on every door knob. And by the time we completed the photography, he told us it was too important to be written about only in English. We had to do French, we had to do Portuguese versions.
Wow.
Yeah.
What is the cultural impetus to do this form of journalism? How important is it culturally? Because sometimes people are just like, oh, your pictures, you're just taking pictures. What is as an intellectual, what is the cultural impetus to do this sort of journalism?
You see, I always tell people, if Africans appreciate themselves, if Africans appreciate themselves, today, Ovation or its publisher would have won a kind of Pulitzer Prize for Africa. But we don't celebrate ourselves. We wait until we get the Nobel Prize, we get the Pulitzer Prize and all that. Look, the contribution of what we are doing and what we have done to culture in Africa is incredible. For the first time, you see Muslim weddings in the north where people are now wearing Ashwebi, Ashoke. It never used to be like that. It never used to be like that. Now you can see how that fosters unity amongst our people, where you see an Igbo wants to dress like a Yoruba, or a Yoruba wants to dress like a Shekiri, or a Shekiri wants to dress like a T. You know, so, and it's because people began to see Ovation as a cultural magazine, as a fashion catalog. When you are going to your designer, you will send a copy, say, go to page so and so. That thing that Bola Shagaya was wearing, Shade Okoya was wearing, that's exactly the design I want. That's one. Two, the proliferation of tailors. You will see that today, you even have special fashion magazines where all they do is to show the different styles. That was from Ovation. So, in terms of culture, now if you go anywhere and look at what we call the engagement events, traditional weddings.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, that is the beauty of Ovation television, because it's even more powerful in audiovisual than in a magazine. So a lot of our children who live abroad, who don't know anything about Nigerian tradition, so they can now refer to Ovation, they can go to our YouTube channel, and they will be able to see how these things are done. Okay, so if I'm going home for my own wedding, okay, what are the expectations? How do you kneel down? How do you do all those things? And then those who sell jewelry, the fabric sellers, in fact, even food. In food, you see people now, they write kekelemu inside parties. You know, have where they are serving you palm wine, and we're going. You know, you see Eja Shower and Dodo. Everything is because some people made sure that the business of event planning blossomed in Africa.
I mean, but I think, because for me, I like to document things, and I wanted this interview because I've always said it when you are not there, but I wanted to say it to your face, because I remember how transformative Ovation was when it came on. Nobody has seen anything like that before, and seeing those kind of glossy, powerful pictures and images, how it brought, you know, exactly what you're describing now. I remember then that there will be a picture of me in Ovation, and somebody will call from America and say, that dress that Fumi was wearing, you know, that sort of thing in Ovation. And then other people copied you. By copying you, it became, you know, kind of like it generated a will of progress in that area, kind of like created this imperialism, what I call Nigeria's cultural imperialism across Africa and in Black communities around the world. I think that Ovation played a very important role in it. The other thing that I wanted to say to you whilst you are here is that in the media industry, oftentimes you find that when people come newly, others who are there before maybe are a little threatened by them. You are the only person in media in Nigeria who has never done anything but put me forward. I would remember that I would go to events and there were pictures of me, and some platforms will refuse to put pictures of me in papers because they are like, oh, they don't want to empower that girl. That's how they used to say it. But you would put a picture, and you know what you said? You were the first person to put under my name, television star. You did not call me for a television presenter. You called me television star in 2002. I appreciate that. And I thought that I should tell you to your face that those things matter. And I try and do the same to younger people all the time. I'm always, you know, about them. Shay, I have them. And I'm always saying the same thing I say to them, the new generation of people. So I thank you for that. You know, that's what I wanted this to come out for people to know. But I needed to now say, in terms of now that this kind of thing is forcing us all to think differently about how we do things, what kind of things need to come together to kind of like spearhead a more rapid growth in media? And you know, media is wide. There's all sorts of media. As we said, there are people doing investigative journalism. There are those doing culture journalism. There are those doing, and there's a whole new young generation of people doing this kind of what do they call that? There's a kind of like an alt sort of media. You know, all of it has its place. But what would help to kind of like spearhead growth, measurable growth in terms of money, in particular, and economy?
You see, it's a very obvious thing that we all ignore. Collaborations. Everybody wants to stand alone. It's the same thing in our politics. That's why the young people will continue to contest and they will get 20,000 votes in a country of 200 million people because we all stand alone. We will never agree that Fumi has something that I need. Bob D has something that I need. So how do we come together? So you don't have to spend all your money. It's part of my strategy at Ovation. When Virgin Atlantic was coming, I knew Virgin might not be able to have a budget to pay huge sums of money on Ovation. I approached them. They also approached me, and we agreed on a barter. This, how smart these guys were. So for about 10 years, people will just see me flying all over the world. They will not know the secret. They will say, that boy is rich. Oh. But it's a barter deal. So when I'm traveling, I'll call Virgin, give me ticket. Virgin too wants to do something. They call Ovation. Oh, yeah, put us in it. Richard Branson is coming to Africa. We want Ovation. We need the same thing in the media urgently. But everybody is standing alone. You see a media organization dying. But arrogance will not allow the owners to say, hey, why don't we even sell a part of it to Dele Momodu? Do you understand? Why don't we give some of our content to Dele Momodu? There were times I approached magazines that were dying. I approached them. I said, I can assure you Ovation is not going to die because we passed that stage. This year now, we're 24 years old. I said, so why don't you publish your magazine and let us insert it? We will still retain your name. We will help you carry it. So now Ovation will be a double magazine. You are not paying, but I will use my own network to help you distribute your sweat. They will say, no, somebody will come and tell them, Dele Momodu wants to take over your magazine. I said, no, it's still your own magazine. It will still have your name. In fact, you on your masthead, all your names will be there. You are the publisher. All the Ovation is doing is to insert people. You will also remember, I used to invite at least about 6, 7 of my friends if I was traveling anywhere in the world. I will invite them. Let's go to Gambia. And expand. And when I go there and we meet the president, I will introduce them individually. This is the publisher of this is the publisher. But
you did that for me. You did that for me to Ghana. Do you remember when we used to go to that hotel, Labadi Beach and all of that?
Labadi Beach, yes.
Even I had forgotten it. Now that you mention it, I must say, yes, you did that. You would take us all along. Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
I never really thought about it, that was what you were doing then too. Yeah.
That's what I was trying to do. I used to tell people that we can also bid for adverts together. So that if we go to UBA, we'll tell UBA, we have a group, it's like a consortium. We have a group of 7 magazines. So your advert, your product will appear in all 7. So it becomes bigger for the advertiser. But not lie, our people will not agree. Everybody is a wheeler dealer. Let me go and do my own deal. Let me make my own money. I don't want. So that is the attitude. And that is why the media today has become endangered. It's very unfortunate, but I know that the strongest will survive. But you have to think out of the box.
Right. What's your, this year you turned 60. I can't believe you're 60. To me, you're kind of like permanently around 40.
Well, that's the way I feel too. You won't believe it. I don't feel. If you look at my pictures of 20 years ago, you'll be amazed. I look exactly the same. Yeah. I mean, you have known me from way back. I have not, even in terms of, people say you get weaker. And if I think I'm working now harder than even then. You can see me day and night, 2 a.m. I'm on this platform. Because now I'm also trying to reach out to the people in America. So I've started my own Instagram chats at night, so that those who live in America, they come back home around that 12 midnight Nigerian time. So we just have to keep working because I love what I'm doing anyway. I enjoy it.
It shows, Bobby. So where are you ever going to retire?
No, I don't think so. By the grace of God, God give me good health to the last day. I don't want to retire. I enjoy what I want to even add to it now is writing books. I'm working on a library research. I've been on it for a while, which would enable me also impart knowledge to others. I want to make sure I can go to UI or go to IFE or go to Lead University or anywhere, give lectures to people like Wole Soyinka used to do for us in IFE. We never used to see Soyinka for 1 year at a stretch. But whenever it came around, everybody wanted to be there. That's the only way you can inspire this generation. This generation is fast losing interest in everything, even in themselves. So we need to bring them back to life. We need to encourage them and tell them that we also went through that process. People will say, oh, your own time was good. But our own time, we see how the Limos go riot. In our time, in 1978, there was the Limos. So all the issues we are fighting now, we're fighting it then. Right. NEPA. We had problem of NEPA, we still have it today. So, but the thing is that every individual must be prepared to take charge of his or her life.
But I have two more questions finally. The first one is, I've known you to be a warrior when it comes to people trying to pull you down. I know we used to say in those days, you used to say, don't fight a man with his own platform. Don't
attack a man who has a platform of response.
Exactly. This was before Twitter came to life. You used to say that. And I've seen you battle people on any platform if they came for you. So, I mean, how do you cope with people who, because I see people come for you sometimes who don't understand you. And I smile because I'm always like, leave Bob Dibon, they will deal with these people. But how does it really feel inside us on one hand? And then two, what's your dream for Nigeria?
Well, the thing about now, as I get older, I don't fight that much. But I like to put my own views out for posterity because Google now captures everything. In fact, in the past, in those days, it was in newspapers. Now it's online. And whatever they write, you can travel somewhere now. Somebody says you are a thief. If you don't correct it, wherever you go, then they can catch you and say, well, they said you were a thief and you didn't respond. So I always respond. It's not to convince anybody about my innocence. It's just to put my own side of the story out there. So let's keep it there. Then my dream for Nigeria is that I'm looking for a unifier. I'm looking for a leader who will truly believe in Nigeria. The day you find one, you will see that all the agitations about restructuring, about this, about religion, and all that they will vanish. Nigeria desperately need more than it. In fact, every opportunity I have now, I'm appealing to Buhari that I'm not expecting that you will solve problems of electricity, of good roads in the next 3 years that you have left, but you can solve one problem. And that problem is the one that will solve the problem of insecurity, is unity. People are so frustrated. People are so disenfranchised. Everybody's just going mad in Nigeria at the moment. There is so much insanity in the land. And the root cause of it is that there is no unity. We don't love ourselves. You see people who go to church, they are not ready to forgive anybody. So I'm preaching that spirit of forgiveness and I'm begging our leaders. This one is not criticism. And in fact, now I don't do radicalism again. I'm an elder statesman, at 60. Yeah. So I'm begging Buhari to please unite Nigeria. Stop all these divisions. They're appointing people from one area to one area. No, let us do it. And Buhari himself will enjoy his retirement in peace. He will be proud of that. But if Nigeria divides under him, he will regret it for life. So as someone who supported him in 2015, I still love him. I believe he has a role to play. I beg Baba Buhari, please unite Nigeria. Thank you.
On that note, I have nothing else to say but to say to you, thank you, Bob D, for coming on the live, and also thank you for the many, many years.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, my dear sister. God bless you.
God bless you too.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye now. And so that's my conversation that's all my conversations for today. Remember, I had a chat earlier with Ndidi Okonkwo about agriculture, and then with Lisa Folawiyo about fashion, finally with the great Bob D, the Chief Dele Chief Doctor. Somebody here is always saying doctor. You should show your face too. Chief Doctor Dele Momodu. As I said, we're rounding up on the lives. I don't have this energy. I would like to do the studio beats and then on many other things. But then you'll hear about it some other time. But remember, she say follow Public Eye
Live, guys, bye.